Welcome. Today you're going to hear the Great Family Story. It comes from the Complete Guide to Godly Play, Volume 2 by Jerome Berryman, and it's published by Church Publishing. For this story, we need a little bit of the desert. The desert was a really important place where things happened, and we want to know what it was like to be in the desert. In our classroom, we have a much bigger box, but for today, I think this smaller box will do just fine for our story. In the desert, the wind blows and it lifts the sand up, and it can actually sting you if you're in the desert walking through it. It can also be easy to lose your way in the desert with the wind blowing like that, the sand shifting. The sun would beat down, scorch your skin. It would be very cold at night. You'd have to wear special clothes when you're walking through the desert. If you're walking through the desert, you wouldn't find things growing along the way. There's not much food to eat in the desert, and there's no water to drink. The desert is a dangerous place. No one travels in the desert unless they have to. After the great flood, the creatures scattered to all four corners of the earth, making homes, first in small villages, and then cities began to grow. Often, people would gather around rivers. This is the great river of the Euphrates. People settled by this river in this town called Ur. The people who lived in Ur believed that there were many gods. A god for every plant, for every tree, for every bird in the sky, for the wind, for the land, for the water. Many gods. Now there was one family, and Sarai and Abram were part of that family. They believed that God was in everything and everywhere, but they weren't completely sure about that. And when it came time for them to travel to a new place, they wondered if God would be there. They traveled along the river, and old people within their family and young people traveled with them to their new home in Haran. And they brought with them animals, sheep and donkeys, and they would camp by the river at night, and everyone could get their fill of the water from the river, and then they would get back up in the morning and they would travel on. Finally, eventually, they got to the city called Haran, and they settled there for a little bit. At night, Abraham would go out to the edge of the desert, and he would look up at the sky. And one night, God came so close to Abram, and Abram came so close to God that he knew what God wanted for him to do. He wanted for him to take he and Sarai and a few others in their family and travel in the desert to a new and different place. Abram and Sarai did what God wanted them to do. And so they started to travel on a long journey through the desert. Now there was no river to follow here, so they had to just travel on the best they could with the directions that they had. One day, they came to a place called Shechem. And Abram went up a hill and knelt down and prayed to God. And God was there. Abram built a small temple. He put some stones together, and he said a prayer of thanksgiving that God was there with them on this journey. But this was not where God wanted them to stay. And so they traveled on, and they came to a new place called Bethel. And there again, Abram went up a hill and prayed to God. And God was there too. So again, Abram took stones and made an altar and offered thanksgiving to God that God was there. But God did not want them to stay there either. And so they traveled on to a place called Hebron, and there they settled. They placed their tents there, and they made their home there. One night, Abram went out into the desert, and again, God came so close to Abram, and Abram came so close to God that Abram heard God's voice saying, "You will become the father of a great family. Sarai will be the mother." Abram heard these words and laughed because he knew that they were very old. They had no children of their own, and he just did not think this was possible. God said, "Change your names. Abram, you will now be called Abraham, the father of many, and Sarai's name will change to Sarah." So Abraham went back and told Sarai of her new name and of what God had spoken to him. I think they laughed again. Later on, 3 strangers arrived one day to their home. Abraham and Sarah welcomed them into their home and gave them food and water to drink. And when they were visiting, these strangers said, "You will have a son." And again, Sarah was close by and she heard this and she laughed. How could this be? For she knew that she was very old. The strangers left and went back on their way in the desert. And you know what happened? Abraham and Sarah did have a child, and their child's name was Isaac. Isaac means laughter. Isaac grew to be a fine young man, and Sarai was old and tired, and she died and was buried in a cave underneath the oaks of Mamre. Abraham was also very tired, but he knew he had one more thing that he wanted to do. He needed to find a wife for his son, and so he sent one of his helpers back in the desert, back to the place where their family was. And when they got there, the helper went to a well to drink water and to feed his animals. And there at the well, he met a young woman named Rebecca. Rebecca helped him to get his water and to feed and to give water to his animals, and she invited him to come to their home for dinner. So at their home for dinner, Rebecca and her family heard all about this great family that was promised. And Rebecca decided that she wanted to be part of that great family. She was very brave and very courageous, as well as very kind. So she left her family and she traveled back across the desert, and there was Isaac, there to greet her, and they got married. And Abraham was very tired, and he passed away also, and was also buried in the cave underneath the oaks. Isaac and Rebekah had children, and their children had children, and their children's children had children, and there were many, many children, all the way till your grandparents had your parents, and your parents had you. There were as many children as the stars in the sky or the grains of sand in the desert. And you are part of that great family. I wonder what you liked most about this story. We are all on journeys. I wonder where you are on this journey. I wonder what in this story is important for you to hear today. Lots of great wondering questions for you to have time to think about and wonder with your family or with your friends. And some of you may have received something from the church, which is a special package, and you can open your package and see what's in it. And if any of you didn't get a package and want to, you go ahead and just contact St. Margaret's, and we will help arrange for you to have your package too. May you all have a very blessed day.